They have lost in a big way already, and that has slowed them down. We are far from throwing out the idea and the reality that our environmental laws do still exist, and they are still helping us win these fights. It's very interesting to see the Trump administration. They are trying to bend these laws as far as they can go, but there's a limit to that, and they're running into themselves at this point. They moved really quickly. They did some things that I think anyone would take a look at and say, that's just patently unlawful. It's just, that's not the way the law was written. It's clear. And we're now in court.
You're listening to the Rewilding Earth podcast. I'm your host, Jack Humphrey. Cooper Freeman is back with us on the podcast today. As Alaska Director for the Center for Biological Diversity, Cooper is on the front lines of some of the most critical conservation battles in the country. It's no secret that we're dealing with a relentless, fast-track push for de-wilding and deregulation. And yet, Cooper brings some perspective and much-needed hope to the conversation. He talks about how bedrock environmental laws are still holding the line, the reality behind the misleading headlines, and why, despite immense pressure, the administration has yet to build a single mile of those threatened roads or drill a single new well in the Arctic refuge. We also dive into how this defensive era is sharpening our strategic muscles as a movement, and how the center is still finding ways to go on the offensive with creative new lawsuits to protect species like the northern fur seal. It's a gritty, honest, and ultimately motivating conversation about staying human, staying defiant, and being the sand in the crankcase of the machine. Cooper, welcome back to the Rewilding Earth podcast.
Thanks so much for having me back, Jack. It's wonderful to be here with you.
I thought there was a chance I'd have you back under better circumstances. Like the next time Cooper comes back, we won't have to talk about politics but that's just not going to be the case today. But we do have some wins to talk about too. So it's not going to be a bunch of depressing stuff. But how do you characterize where we sit today in Alaska specifically and broader if you'd like?
I was reflecting on our conversation, I think about a year ago. And at that time, the big dramatic cuts, the Doge cuts, were just coming into force. I think we were on the edge of talking about park rangers and biologists. And yeah, I mean, it feels like a century ago, but it was only about a year ago. And where we are today is we're in a historic moment right now, at least up here in Alaska, which is where I live and where all my energy is focused. We're really on the precipice. It's been a year and a half. There's been a lot of activity within the Trump administration. By and large, we have kept harm off the ground. There are a lot of bad things happening right now, and we are on the precipice of the bulldozers coming out and the chainsaws revving up in a way we really haven't seen in at least 15 years here in Alaska. There's been some really bad things. The Willow Project, I don't know if people remember the huge oil and gas project that the Biden administration approved up in the Western Arctic. So it's not to say that there haven't been some really bad things that have gotten through, but the scope and scale of the potential harm, the tidal wave of potential harm that's coming to Alaska's wild landscapes and its wildlife and fish and birds and communities is really profound. On the other hand, as you mentioned, there's just an incredible sense of solidarity and an incredible amount of hard work that's happening within our Alaska team and all across the organization at the center, pitching in up here in Alaska. And we have 2.5 years to go. It feels like a very long time from now, but we are going to do everything we can to keep that harm off the ground and get through these 4 years, looking back and saying, it was absolutely crazy. We fought our butts off, but look, we saved most of these places. Most of these species can stay in their homes, protected, safe, and continuing for the rest of time, hopefully. And that's the North Star. So that's what we're working hard to do. And that's where we are. It's daunting, but we're motivated, we're inspired, and we're trying to just put one foot in front of the next each and every day.
That would be a heck of a lot more than what we can say about the United States in general and its natural heritage. That we save most of it, we cannot say. So I don't know. We have to find really perverse ways sometimes to make ourselves feel better in the moment. Like I don't know if you feel that sometimes, but it's like, why am I using that to cheer me up?
Well, what I'll say is that this is the opportunity of Alaska. I mean, this is what Alaska in many ways means to this country and this nation and the world, really. And certainly for people here too. We haven't messed up Alaska in the same way we have everywhere else. I'm not from Alaska. I'm not born and raised here. I know what it looks like to drive across massive landscapes, whole watersheds, concrete jungles, float down the Colorado River. That's still an amazing place, but it's a massive pipeline and a huge water system. And we have these incredible large landscapes that are still intact, that are absolutely teeming with wildlife. Whether the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge with 100,000 porcupine caribou that birth their young every year, polar bears across the landscape, to the Katmai, Lake Clark, Bristol Bay area where there are just thousands and thousands of brown bears that you can go days on end by floating or walking through that landscape and see no people, but see lots of brown bears and catch fish every night for dinner. And these places still exist in our country. They exist in Alaska, and it's what makes it so unique to be an environmentalist up here, to get to fight these battles for these massive places that you really can't fight for anywhere else in the country. And that's not to diminish the importance of every place in the lower 48, in Hawaii, all over the country, they're incredibly biologically intense and important. There are huge intact landscapes in the lower 48, but the scope and scale of Alaska is really unique. And so I don't use those words lightly when I say we really haven't messed it up. I mean, Alaska has changed in a huge way, and we have made a lot of mistakes up here, from clear cutting massive parts of the Tongass forest, rainforest down in southeast Alaska, to developing huge oil fields in the Arctic already. Nonetheless, these landscapes still exist. These species are still here, and we need to keep it that way.
Yeah, you don't ever have to apologize for Alaska being awesome. I don't know how bad it makes other states feel. It probably just makes them feel good that Alaska's there, and we are all still here. So what's the fight looking like now? I mean, it's, like you characterized the very beginning when we first started talking, that the Doge months look so cute compared to what's been going on and been proposed and threatened. How have the threats changed, and how would you characterize it now?
Well, Alaska is different, and it's also very much the same. I mean, we are fighting tooth and nail a gold mine going into a national park. It's the gold mine itself would be on a private inholding that you could almost throw a stone to the edge of the J. Hammond Wilderness in Lake Clark National Park, and that would require a 20-mile haul road that would go through the actual Lake Clark National Park to an industrial port on the coast of Cook Inlet, which is where I live. This would be on the other side. I can see it on many drives around here. And that also happens to be the only known winter foraging grounds for the critically endangered Cook Inlet belugas, this remarkable, unique, distinct species that the center was a huge part of getting listed under the Endangered Species Act in the 90s. So there is crazy stuff happening up here in that same way. Gold mines and national parks, border walls through national parks, north and south. This administration is, willing to do it all. And using this mine called the Johnson Tract Mine, or the Lake Clark National Park mine, is a great example. A lot of what we're seeing right now is just a complete dismantling and crumbling of any sense of public involvement, public notice and comment, rules and regulations, and our bedrock environmental laws that have protected these places up here in Alaska and all across the lower 48 in our imperiled species, and to some extent our climate, from really going over the edge. And so what that looks like on a day-to-day basis is, in the past, what we would see is we would get an initial notice of a project. Hey, we're planning on a big timber sale in the Tongass, and we want your thoughts. And whether they listen to us or not, we have the opportunity. They'll give you 60 days. The federal government goes back and they say, wow, this is a really significant project. And this is Republican and Democrats. This is, both sides of the aisle go back and do full environmental impact statements where they review a range of alternatives. They do thorough Endangered Species Act consultations. Oftentimes they're not very good. We get a 90-day comment period. We're able to turn out millions of comments. And we have meetings. We do public hearings. We can organize. We can activate. And then we're able to put together when the federal government makes a decision that we think violates the law because it threatens endangered species or it will result in unreasonable water pollution or air pollution, etc. We're able to put together good lawsuits, and we go to the courts. And the center has a tremendous success rate with our litigation. We have an incredible attorney team now, about 100 strong. What we're seeing now is these projects advancing at warp speed scale in the dead of night with the bare minimum environmental analysis, endangered species consultations, and the next thing you know, they're approved, and we've not even seen any part of it. And worse, what we're seeing is a lot of these projects being designated national emergencies under Trump's critical metals and oil and gas crisis executive order that he put forth on day one. This Johnson Tract Lake Clark National Park gold mine is a great example. There's small quantities of zinc and copper. They're rounding errors on the domestic need. It's a gold mine. It has been deemed a national emergency because the backers are calling it a critical metals mine, because right now you just call any mine critical metals. And what that means is they're operating under emergency regulations, meaning they're getting rid of all public notice and comment. They're giving tribes 7 days to comment on cultural resource harms. They're fast tracking Endangered Species Act consultation, and the on the ground harms are that we're seeing this critical habitat for Cook Inlet belugas getting potentially decimated. We're seeing our Lake Clark National Park coastline, one of the richest bear ecosystems in the world, renowned for its bear viewing, silver salmon, actually all 5 species of Pacific salmon in this area. I mean, it's really, as an environmental defender, we are just scraping the sides of the barrel to keep up. And I think we're doing a remarkable job, but the word I use is dystopian. It really is dystopian. If you were to write a novel about what would it look like to truly just throw our environmental laws and regulations into the wind and just try to send it, like just go for it and get it done as quick as possible before the attorneys can get in the courtroom and the judges can make a decision. And once it's in, and let's just get it in. And that's what's happening. And so we are having to fight tooth and nail day in and day out. And it's intense. But we're doing the best we can. And again, so far, I think we're keeping up and we're keeping harm, big harm off the ground. But we're about to enter a real test moment here as the ground thaws and summer gets going here in Alaska, which is when construction ramps up.
Wilderness is self-willed land. A wild animal is a self-willed animal. They are earthlings that are as yet not thralls to man. Those words from Dave Foreman define why we do what we do. The Rewilding Earth podcast is a long-running project of the Rewilding Institute. Because of listeners, donations, and people and organizations sharing this podcast with others, you've helped us spread the blueprint for a wilder, more self-willed world. But we can't let up. Most of the world still needs to absorb what it means to restore nature for its own sake. Please consider making a donation today to support the show. Your gift helps us reach the next generation of rewilders who will rebalance the natural world. Go to rewilding.org/donate to help us spread the word. And thanks for standing with the wild.
When Ukraine got invaded,
I didn't know that much about their capabilities, but I'm really impressed with how the Ukraine just keep going. I mean, just to stop being completely rolled over, push them back. And I've really seen that as an allegory to the conservation attacks. In some ways, we shouldn't be winning. You know, if you just looked at it from a surface level, it's like, how are we doing any winning? And winning right now is characterized by not letting them have another inch. But how could you characterize that the battle has changed as we've learned more about the enemy? What kinds of new tools are you employing? What kinds of things are you seeing on the ground that are different than any of your history before this as a necessity to keep as much as possible intact?
I don't like to use military metaphors, and I've never been in actual war, so I hesitate there too. I was a class 5 expedition guide for many years, and we would take veterans sometimes on trips, and they would say, "This is the closest to combat I've ever been." But I do think a lot about our work right now as being in war, and whether that's thinking about what kind of squadron do we need to deploy to this challenge right now? Is this a special ops team that we send in for a quick strike mission to throw some sand in the gears and then retreat so that we can deploy elsewhere to another brush fire? Or do we entrench here? Do we build trenches and we're going to be in this for the next 4 years fighting this court case tooth and nail? But it's going to be a long slog, and we're doing both. And it's a fascinating time to really be strategic because we also, like Ukraine, have very limited resources. We can't match the resources of the Trump administration and the federal government. So where do we deploy our energy and our time, and how do we do it in a exceptionally strategic way so that we can actually win and not get distracted and fight the right fights in the right way? And some of these, it's impossible to know what the right thing to do is in the moment. Hindsight is 2020, but I do think about that all the time. And how I approach that is, one, I think we bring every tool in the toolbox right now. Right now is a moment to say, what is the right tool for the moment? And that's what we need to do. And I love working at the Center for Biological Diversity because I think it's really what we're made to do. It's how we're set up. We have PhD climate scientists and wildlife biologists on staff, and we have campaigners and organizers. We have amazing attorneys. We have a crack digital team. We have advocates who can go out and do anything you need and at any moment. And so what we have at the Center for Biological Diversity is the ability to bring the right tool in the moment and then go really hard and be uncompromising and fearless. And I'm also an environmental history major, and I studied environmental movements, and so much is different and so much is the same. I mean, in so many ways, the strategy still is to just throw as much sand in the gears as possible to muck it up and slow things down. And of course, we do that in a way that is based on these amazing environmental laws that we've passed. They haven't overturned the Endangered Species Act despite many attempts. They haven't overturned the MMPA, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, despite attempts to radically change it from our lovely House representative up here in Alaska this past year, which got an incredible amount of pushback up here amongst Alaska Native subsistence communities and marine mammal scientists and defenders. And so, it's an interesting moment where we need to be rapidly strategic and be nimble. We need to bring wisdom and innovation and creativity. And we need to look to the past to see what's been successful, what's worked, and also keep pushing and keep assessing each and every moment. And it's, it's incredibly intellectually stimulating, and it's also terrifying. And it's also enthralling because we have gotten some wins. And I think a lot of what gets me through this is actually visualizing what it will feel like to win some of these things and to stop some of these things, and the incredible amount of joy and happiness and just the camaraderie that has been built through these fights already. It's really tremendous. And so bringing all of that, and I do think a lot of what we're doing, if you want to use Ukraine as a metaphor, I think it's a really good one. And I hope we can get where they are a few years ahead of us and say, we've lost some things. We're going to lose some things. It's going to be hard. It's going to hurt. And it's going to be really tragic, but hopefully we can remain intact and then, rebuild in a really good way.
I keep thinking of things that might fall out of this. Like, we're going to be in the best shape of our lives as a movement, literally the best shape. We're going to be more cut and built and strong and able than we have been in any time in my lifetime after this, because we've gone to the woodshed. I mean, we're really, really, really in it. And I wonder what that's going to mean when another administration takes over and they feel, I mean, we're not going to just go sit on a couch and eat popcorn. Like, I don't know that any administration is going to be able to handle what's coming at them already. And they should be very, very worried if they have any interest in protecting oil, gas, timber, any of that stuff. They should be extremely worried about us, because if we live through this, we are going to be the biggest nightmare of theirs of all time.
I couldn't agree more. And we do have to, I think about it all the time of how do we pace ourselves in such a way that 2.5 years from now, Gaia willing, we end up with a far more sane, friendly administration and we need to be ready to push harder than we ever have. We're going to be tired. We're going to be pooped. We will be in incredible shape. How do we roll into that ready to go on day zero, and what are we pushing for and what do we want? How do we reset the field in another historic push in another historic way? And we at the center are doing a lot of internal strategizing and dreaming about what that looks like. And up here in Alaska, we're really thinking about what we need to get done in 4 years. And we can't get started 2 years into the next administration. We have to be, as this administration did, as this Trump administration did, they were ready to roll and they came in like it's been really unbelievable. I don't want to say we were unprepared for it, but the pace and scale of, just again, throwing it all to the wind and just going for it, ripping things up, disregarding them. I'm not saying we should take the same approach. What I am saying is we sure as heck need to be ready on day one to not only rebuild, but build way further in terms of, as you said, we need to get more wilderness areas. We need to designate more critical habitat and rebuild the Endangered Species Act implementation and funding so we can actually start to recover species and have an Endangered Species Act that the act isn't the problem. We need to really innovate and push on implementation and push funding forward. There is so much we could be doing, and it's exciting to think about. As I said, I think there are going to be some big, hard losses. We're going to try to minimize them as much as possible, and I think we'll be successful in many cases. But when people see in their backyards or in the places they love, or even places that they love in their imaginations, that they're being wrecked by an industrial road that leads to a big open pit mine across the Arctic, or a massive clear cut in the Tongass, or you name anywhere in the lower 48 that people care about, they grew up going to, and they see the harm on the ground, I think we're going to have a moment of reckoning and outrage. And I wish it didn't take that, but I hope we can be in a position in 2.5 years to capture that, to gather it all up and make some big changes. And in the meantime, we got a heck of a fight again to not lose as much ground as we can, and keep things intact until we get there. It's been a year and a half. We got 2.5 years to go, and we just got to keep pushing.
Back to the idea that an administration has always had the ability to come in since the beginning, the founding of this country, and just roll over any legislation it wants to, as is evidenced by this. And then it doesn't matter if it's illegal, because we can't get justice in the same time frame that they're breaking all the laws. Now that we've come to the realization that none of that stuff had any guardrails at all, if there's an administration with an appetite for just completely ignoring all the laws of the land and the Constitution and everything, which is what we have right now, what has to go along with that work that you just laid out that protects some of our core laws?
I might have a little different perspective here, and I'll offer my perspective from my position up here in the weeds of this all with my head stuck in it.
Yeah.
I think this administration is the most unlawful, unlaw-abiding administration ever. I don't think that's a surprising statement to any of your listeners. What I'm seeing right now is they are at the same time really grappling with our laws do still exist. And while there are judges that are ready to rubber stamp the Trump's administration's every wants and wishes, there are also judges that aren't willing to do that. And they have lost in a big way already. And that has slowed them down. And so, from my perspective, and I certainly think from the center's perspective, we are far from, throwing out the idea and the reality that our environmental laws do still exist, and they are still helping us win these fights. And it's very interesting to see the Trump administration. They are trying to bend these laws as far as they can go, but there's a limit to that, and they're running into themselves at this point. They moved really quickly. They did some things that I think anyone would take a look at and say, that's just patently unlawful. It's just, that's not the way the law was written. It's clear. And we're now in court. And I'll give an example. The Center for Biological Diversity, it's a bit of a tangent, but we petitioned to list ice seals, actually 4 species of Arctic ice seals. And I think it was 2008. We had to sue, of course, to get the agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NOAA Fisheries, to list the species. They listed 2 of the species, ringed and bearded seals. Then they're supposed to designate critical habitat that protects, of course, not just the species, but the habitat they need to survive. And we sued to force them to do that. And they designated over 160 million acres of marine habitat, largely in the Arctic Ocean and some in the Bering Sea. And what this means is that any oil and gas project, any bad development that could harm the seals, they have to take the seals into consideration. And that's really good for the seals. The state of Alaska had tried to undo that, saying, oh, well, that was too big. And we used science and they sued the federal government, the Biden administration, that was going to uphold the critical habitat designation. When the Trump administration came in, they said, we agree with the state of Alaska. We should get rid of this critical habitat designation and open up these 160 million plus marine acres to any development, irrespective of the harm it'll cause to these amazing ice seals. And so we intervened, and it went all the way up to the Ninth Circuit. The Trump administration decided it was not going to defend the federal government's own decision, but we did, and we hung in there, and we just got a massive victory. The court agreed with us on every count, which is not common in the Ninth Circuit. And those 160 million acres are still protected. That was just a month or 2 ago. So, while I agree with you, there's been a massive attempt to gut, especially the implementing regulations of these laws. They're still there. And, we don't get tired of litigating. It's what we do. We're really good at it. And, we're going to keep using that as a core strategy, because I guess we're not convinced that the rule of law is completely gone in this country. And, if we're going to win in these next 4 years, we need a lot more than litigating. In these next 2.5 years, we need to do a lot more than litigating, but I think it'll remain certainly one of, if not our core strategy. And we will get some successful decisions. And so far, by and large, we have seen the Trump administration not do things that courts have said don't do them, although they're certainly trying and pushing really hard.
Yeah.
We're going to keep pushing.
Well, I love every word you just said. That is great. And it reminds me that I've had to remind myself to be much, much more discerning when I'm reading about something that the administration wants to do versus has done. I think that's really important, because news agencies need to do as much clickbaity stuff as they possibly can to get people to read and get exposed to their ads. And so they'll write headlines that are very, very misleading sometimes, where you're like, wow, nothing in the living natural world stands a chance.
Trump has said my strategy is you just tell people whatever should be fact over and over and over again. You bonk them over the head with it, and then they believe it. So what we need to do is keep reminding people that these laws exist and we can win, and push back against those narratives. If you look at on the ground in Alaska, again, there have been some really bad things that have happened, lands that have been conveyed, federal lands that have been given over to the state that under this, our current state governor and administration are only going to do bad things to them. I mean, there have been some really bad things that have happened. But if you talk about things like the road through the Eisenbeck Refuge and Wilderness, not a single mile of road has been built yet. If you look at the Ambler Road across the gates of the Arctic National Park and the Southern Brooks Range, not a single mile of road has been built yet. If you look at oil and gas development in the Arctic Refuge, not a single oil well has been drilled in the Arctic Refuge. There's not been a single mile of pipe laid for the Alaska LNG climate bomb project yet. There hasn't even been a single Tongass old growth clear cut yet. Now, as I've said before, we are on the precipice of these things happening. The bulldozers are getting geared up and ready to go. The chainsaws are coming out. Pipeline orders are supposedly being placed. So I don't want to undersell the intensity of the moment and the danger of the moment. But what you said, I think, is so true, is that there's what they want to do, and then there's us. And I don't just mean the Center for Biological Diversity. I mean all of us that are in the way of them doing this. And we're not going to go down without a fight. And we're also not going to stop fighting. Even when they start, we're not going to stop fighting. But we're trying with every ounce of energy we have to make sure that that never happens. And they will run out of time, and they will run into bad court decisions. They also need money for all this stuff. And it turns out all these stupid projects they've been talking about for decades are loss leaders. They're huge loss leaders. They don't make sense. They're living in a fossil fuel extractive mindset that, push comes to shove, especially in today's economic environment, just these projects don't pencil out. And if they do, they only pencil out for the richest asset management companies and billionaires and trillion-dollar corporations. And so there's so little to gain for people on the ground. The numbers don't pencil out. And they're also violating the laws and trying to push these projects through. And so, I mean, it ain't over until it's over. And despite the buzz, Trump administration officials come in. Doug Burgum, the Secretary of Interior, was just here. He might still be here, talking about, the Alaska Renaissance and everything's coming back. And, there's not a long list of things they've actually been successful with yet. I'm not resting on our laurels. We have a long way to go. We're not sitting on our hands, but I do hope that people can take away from this is, and again, just speaking from Alaska, we got a lot of fight left in us, and we're staying focused on stopping that on the ground harm. And then we need to push really hard at the end of this 2.5 years. Hopefully, again, we can get a more sane, friendly administration, and we can start to unroll some of these really bad decisions. But hopefully those decisions never actually led to the destruction of ecosystems and habitat and wildlife and fish. And that's what we're doing.
I have never felt like a more happy grain of sand in the gears of the machine than just now. Really, you are the sand in the gears. You're in the crankcase. And man, that must make them mad that would they even have to deal with you. And it makes me, and I'm sure everybody listening, very, very delighted that they have to deal with you and everybody else that's fighting, everybody listening, everything that you do. I hope everybody feels very proud of sticking with it and helping the center and doing what you do, because you are sand in the crankcase.
Well, thanks. And we've seen a tremendous outpouring of support from supporters and members across the country and the world. Really, it's really puts wind in our sails. Certainly, we can use every bit of it and more. We're trying to grow and build to meet the moment. It is ecoterrorism. There's no other way to put it. It is absolute ecoterrorism. And it is. It's just deeply sad to the core of my being. And I know so many others that people can care so little about the natural world, Mother Earth. biodiversity and clean air, clean water. I mean, these are the building blocks, not just of human life, but all life and life on this planet, this amazing planet. There were just astronauts that went around the moon. And when they came back, they couldn't stop talking about how
They couldn't stop
fragile and
crying.
little our planet was and how special it is. And I mean, it's mind boggling. Here we are on a little rock and, the vast realm of black space. And I mean, look around. I don't care if you're in Indiana or Ohio. I have little kids and, they can stick their face in the dirt and find all sorts of cool stuff. And wherever you are, life is still trucking on this planet. And it is deeply sad that there are people, especially a huge group of people in power that truly don't understand what's at stake here, not just for this generation, but many, many future generations. On the other hand, there's a tremendous amount of us that do feel that deep to our core, and we're tapping into it. And it does give me hope. And sometimes I feel very scared and angry and upset and, trying to ride the wave and stay even. And fortunately, I live in Alaska in this spectacular place, and I get to, go for a walk outside or go out on the Kachemak Bay where I live, or sometimes I get lucky and take a bush plane over to some, really remote place, and whether to visit a native community that we're working with, or a lodge that's trying to fight a bad development right behind them, or whatever it is. It's special, and we have to stay connected to these places that we love and keep us motivated. And again, just keep putting one foot in front of the next. Back from my river guide days, you just take one drop at a time, and get to put in all in one piece, black side down. And that's what success looks like here.
Paddle forward, keep moving.
Well, I hope I can report back with, more good news than bad news. I do see it as part of my job to stay positive and get our team through these really difficult times. There are other people that are taking on voting rights and abortion access and immigrants' rights. And I mean, there is so much to be fighting for right now. And so we do have a fundamental foundational piece of the puzzle, fighting for, biological diversity and wild landscapes. But we get to, and I say that very intentionally, we get to go to work. Our job every day is to wake up and fight the Trump administration. And we are so busy. I often think I don't have time to be sad and frustrated. I just need to focus on what I need to get done today, because my list is endless. It regenerates 2x every day, 2 to 10x every day. And, there is just not time to despair. There are moments where I think we may need to mourn in a big way, and we'll do that if we have to. We also need to celebrate, and not forget to do that. But it's really head down and stay focused and just keep pushing. And it ain't over until it's over. And I don't want to give a Pollyannish sense that it's like awesome up here. It's incredibly stressful. It's taxing. There are tough days. But again, when we hear from our teams that, wow, we just had 5 million people watch and react to a video that we put out about this relatively, niche issue in Alaska, but people care about the eelgrass beds in the Eisenbeck National Wildlife Refuge and Wilderness, where 99%, nearly the entire global population of Pacific black brant, most of the population of emperor geese, these incredibly beautiful birds, like we're actually at risk of losing entire populations of species, which is really profound. And people don't want to see that happen. And so when we get those boosts, when we hear that, gosh, we just got all these supporters that are really resonating with our approach and our method and what we're doing, and it does give me hope that we can all come together and do our own parts in our own different ways and make it happen.
Yeah. I appreciate the note on the Pollyanna stuff, because I think that if I was tuning in and listening to this in 2006, I wouldn't understand half the things that we talked about today. And I would also be very scared about what I didn't understand about everything we talked about today. What cheers me up today would terrify me in 2000. But it's a different time. And we're dealing with a really extreme kind of situation here. And it's kind of like in Ukraine, when you see people smiling and dancing, I'm like, how do you do that? Like, you're literally, there's things flying over your heads, but they're teaching another example of how we have to stay for the fight. And in order to do that, you're going to have to remain human. And in order to do that, you're going to need to sing and dance sometimes, despite what's going over your head.
And life is so resilient, and I include humans in that. We know from rewilding, which is, I've had the great pleasure and privilege of getting to do rewilding work in the lower 48 where rewilding is needed. We're trying to stop a mass dewilding event up here in Alaska. But we're, rewilding, if we give nature a chance, if we just take our foot off its neck and give it a chance to breathe, it'll come back. And even when we have its foot on its neck, it still is just clawing to come back. I mean, we have amazing footage of jaguars in places we've never seen them in the Southwest. We have wolves coming back all across the West, and we're even talking about bringing grizzly bears back in California, or really looking into it. I do think we don't have to sit here, even during the Trump administration, and take our foot off the gas. Up here, we recently filed a really creative, novel lawsuit. The northern fur seal population in the Bering Sea has been in steep declines, particularly on St. Paul Island, which is part of the Pribilof Islands in the middle of the Bering Sea. It's right where the Bering Sea deep sea comes up to the shelf, and there's these huge cliff walls, and then it goes to this shallow Bering Sea shelf. And like so many of these upwelling areas that we see in cold waters, they're just incredibly fecund, abundant places. And northern fur seals have really thrived on the Pribilof Islands, where they return every summer and haul out and birth their young. And they've been competing with the largest fishery in the United States, the second largest fishery in the world, the industrial pollock trawl fleet. And this is not a mom and pop fishery. It's $1 billion behemoth. These are 300 plus foot vessels with hundreds of people on them. They process nonstop, day in and day out, right there on board. They tow trawl nets that are so big you could fit multiple 747 jets in them. Some are the length of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, they're these huge nets, and they just scoop up everything in their path. They're supposed to be off the bottom, but we know they're on the bottom up to 90+% of the time. So they're really bottom trawling, and they're taking millions of metric tons, about 1 million metric tons, which is billions of pounds of pollock, which are a key forage fish in the Bering Sea ecosystem, out of the ocean every year. And we've been really trying to figure out, how do we help protect these northern fur seals and help them recover? And we went back into the laws, and there's a Northern Fur Seal Act that was passed to protect these seals. And along with some creative endangered species, not endangered species act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, and other issues, we were able to put forth a lawsuit that would actually create, if we get what we want, would create a big time area restriction, essentially stop the pollock fleet from fishing in the area where northern fur seal mothers feed, which they need to nurse and birth healthy young pups to recover the population. And it would ban them from those areas and reduce the competition, and could actually start to recover the population of northern fur seals. And we talk, should we even be doing this stuff right now? We have our hands full just playing defense. And, to me, it's just so clear that we have to keep doing this stuff, not only because it keeps us inspired and motivated, but we can still do this. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so I also think that the rewilding projects we're doing, the landscape connectivity projects that are happening, these creative lawsuits that would actually create new protections for species and expand them, at least us at the center and up here in Alaska, we're still doing that stuff. And I think, to what you said, it'll keep those muscles sharp for when we actually get the opportunity to focus, hopefully, most of our energy doing that stuff versus just playing defense all the time.
Cooper, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Jack. It's always great to talk with you. I love the work of the Rewilding Institute. It's so important, and let's do lots more rewilding and stop the dewilding.
On behalf of everyone at the Rewilding Institute, thank you for listening, sharing, and supporting the Rewilding Earth podcast. Over the last 9 years, this show has grown into a significant global community because of people like you. If you'd like to keep that momentum going and rewild the world with us, please head over to rewilding.org/donate. Your support ensures we keep telling the stories that the wild needs us to hear. Thanks for listening.